Training for street violence. I've been getting a lot of questions about principles and methodologies. How do you really prepare yourself for the street? What's important? And I was thinking about how I was going to put this together for you guys because it's been requested. And I remembered that I did a interview with my buddy TJ Kennedy up in Canada. And he asked me these questions, actually. And we went through a whole thing about how we trained, why it's so important to train a certain way rather than the way most people train. And I'm not going to get too into it. I'm going to let the interview take care of itself. And then we'll come back after and I'll make my final points. Now, listen, before I get to the video, please subscribe to the channel. Please hit the notifications and share it with your friends. If there's a video on here that you really and particularly hit you, please share it with your friends to make them aware of this channel. This is how we're growing. It's all you guys. So I appreciate it. Also, if you want the most blunt, information, I guess is the best way I can put it, on self-protection, go to timlarkin.com and join our free masterclass. Listen, this is YouTube. I can't show everything exactly the way I'd want, and I can't say things exactly the way I'd want because of the conditions that they have on what we can and can't put out. Unfortunately, to get the best information, the cleanest way, go to get the masterclass. That's why I created it, so we can give you, the straight talk offline about, how you deal with violence. For some reason, the platforms just are more concerned about people's feelings being hurt than trying to protect good people like yourselves. So again, I just urge you, make sure you take the time and just give us your email and you get a free masterclass. All right, on to the interview.
One is back when you said you'd strip down the military guys. Basically, if you take a guy down to his like boxers and a t-shirt kind of thing. I read a post on Instagram from an online trainer, self-defense, and it's a Filipino martial arts guy. And the saying was on the post, the blade, what was it? The stick trains the blade trains the hand. And I thought that it was completely backwards. You need to take everything back to its foundation. And like you said, I need to be able to commit that violence, with my own hands, with my own body. And yes, if you put a tool in my hand, whether that's that knife, whether it's that stick, whether it's a rock, whether it's an ashtray, that's just an extension of yourself. And as you say in a lot of your training, those kinds of things are a labor-saving tool, right? Like I could kill you with my bare hands. If I have an ashtray, maybe I could do it with a little bit less effort. But you definitely have to break it down to the bare hands. And in Canada, at least, I can't speak so much for the United States, but in Canada, our culture is so much that, and I work a lot in the security industry, not just in the civilian sector, but liability is this big four-letter word that people are afraid of. And so we do talk a lot about situational awareness. We do talk a lot about behavioral analysis, and all that is highly important because, as you said, you want to avoid it because the threshold for what's going to be okay to land you in that jail cell for 3 days or 6 feet under, very few things will get you to that threshold where that's okay. But we seem to avoid it a lot. Like we put so much focus on the avoidance that we don't actually deal with the what if you can't avoid it. Going to that level.
And what that does, and I train in a lot of it's funny, Western Europe and the States are really the only, North America and the States are really the only places. And when I say North America, I mean above Mexico.
Right.
Because Mexico is a whole other. I've trained a lot in Monterey. I've trained
Another
a lot
planet.
of people. Oh, it's different. They're great. When I train South America, let me get through what I'm saying here. So we train there. Yeah, everybody talks about liability. Everybody's like, oh, what would happen to this? And I get it. I understand. I'm not denigrating that. I understand it's a concern, but they're not understanding the difference between what I train. I train antisocial aggression, which is avoidable, and then asocial violence, which is imminent grievous bodily harm. If you do not respond, you're basically participating in your own murder.
That's right.
And that's the one that I don't care what the situation is, you're going to have to respond at that point. And do you have anything in the toolbox then? And do you know how to delineate between the two? That's really important. You have to understand that because I tell people this all the time. There's no freer feeling in your life when you're facing imminent grievous bodily harm and it clicks off in your mind and your weapon's free. And you can literally do whatever you need to do. It's a freeing, it can be scary after the fact, but it's actually in some weird way, it's really freeing and easy to do that. What you don't want is any conflict. If you're sitting there and you're saying, should I, shouldn't I, it means no, you shouldn't. If there's any hesitation in you that's there, like I tell people all the time, learning this, you'll never violate your moral code. Whatever your moral code is, your moral code. It's just, you understand under certain parameters, I understand how to injure the human body to a point to take it to non-function to save my life. And that's really what the whole focus is about. And understanding that, I mean, you guys do a really good job. The other thing I got to give you from the videos that I've watched that you guys put up, especially when you're in the security industry stuff, you use scenario-based training in the way I think it should be used, meaning a lot of times what you show, it's very specific to being security personnel or a bouncer. And I tell people all the time, I don't do scenario-based training for civilians. I will do it for law enforcement, I will do it for military, and I will do it for security professionals because they tend to see the same profiles over and over and over again.
Yeah, they do.
So it makes sense to deal with car stops. It makes sense to deal with, checkpoints. It makes sense to deal with the door and interacting in the door when you're dealing with those types of professionals. Civilians, I think, get really hampered. When you were talking about the idea of the tool, the blade training the stick training the guy, to me that just violates Peter Drucker's principle about efficiency and effectiveness. His whole thing is, when you define effective, and this is how I look at training from the beginning. When I have somebody, the first thing I'm most important about is making sure that they are effective first. And what is the definition of effective? And Peter Drucker's, he was a famous management consultant, went over to Japan. We ignored him. Detroit ignored him. And Japan did everything that he said after the war. And then they built up Toyota. They built up the car industry, everything through his whole thing. He's a brilliant thinker. But I thought this is something that really caught my eye, was the fact that if you are assiduous about making sure what you're training your clients is effective first, meaning I know this strike, this is a good strike, this is defined, effectiveness is defined as identifying and doing the right things. That's first and foremost. And I think that's where most people in the industry fail. When it comes, if they are training, be very clear, if they are training for real violence, if they are training for street violence, if they're training for protecting yourself from criminal violence, imminent bodily harm and all that stuff, what I see is people focus more on what that gentleman was telling you on the stick and everything. They're focused on efficiency. And that means, I get really good at what I'm doing. I get really good with a stick. I get really good with a knife. But what am I doing with it? Do I really know what I'm doing, or do I know how to do these moves? So I get really efficient at ineffective training.
That's right.
And so the most important thing, I'd much rather have somebody who's effective and inefficient. You see that all the time. You see that in prisons all the time. You see very effective results, very inefficient use of the tool. I mean, there are much smoother ways to do the strikes, much smoother ways to get in, but shit, you can't argue with the results. I mean, they're great. Whereas I see the other thing where I see guys do something, it worked in the gym, it worked in the dojo, it worked in there, and then they go to use it on the street, and guess what? The other guy's not playing the game. You didn't get a result.
That's right. Absolutely.
So, and that's why I think it's very important that, especially with civilians, that we don't put them in any weird scenarios, meaning, and I apologize if you've trained this before. It's not a comment on you, but when I see trainers have civilians and they go, okay, I saw and he's a good friend of mine. He invited me to his seminar. I cringed when he was showing this. It was like, okay, so you're at the bar. And as soon as he said that, I just checked out. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. You got to be kidding me. You're about to show these guys how to bar fight. You're going to tell them that when they get in a pub or when they get in a thing, this is how you take care of yourself, rather than saying, hey, dude, this is the quickest way into the back of a cop car and into the justice system.
Sorry to cut you off there. Like that just to touch base, like that whole at the bar seems to be like the go-to scenario. It doesn't make sense to me. Like
it's old macho bullshit. And TJ, from working the years that you worked at bars and things like, dude, you don't want to have to deal with that stuff. I mean, I saw it in San Diego during the 80s, the Pacific Beach area. It was just murderer's row. I mean, you had all the bike gangs down there. You had everybody was fighting all the time, and you saw real bar fights. The real nasty shit that was there. And you're just like, are you kidding? But every one of those guys, it was all illegal. What people don't understand is a lot of what's shown in these scenarios, the law would view it as, oh, you consented. You're not a victim. You participated in this.
Right.
And now, and now they're trying, and there's all sorts of unintended consequences. I mean, one thing I like to show my clients all the time is I'll show bar scenes where I'll show, like, I have this one great one from Russia, these two huge dudes, and they're beating the crap out of each other. They're just knocking each other down. It's an epic brawl. It's just an epic brawl. And at the very end, they are bloodied. They are hurt. I mean, I'm sure the guy probably had some internal damage, but they both got up and they both were able to walk away. Next video I have is a video, I think it's in Arkansas. Two guys kind of getting in each other's face and they're talking. And then just all of a sudden, one guy just hauls off, hits the other guy, just hits him perfectly. Guy hits, you see his head bounce on the concrete, and he just rolls in the pool of blood. That's it. And these guys were just as big as the two Russians. And my whole thing is, hey, antisocial aggression. Sometimes you get away with it. Sometimes you don't, and was it worth it? And I guarantee you that nobody in that scenario would say, yeah, there was nothing I could have done. I had to participate in this. Mm-hmm. And that's why I just think we're doing a huge disservice. I understand why guys do it because, like, oh, I'm worried at the bar. I had a guy come up to me and goes, well, I want you to teach me. And this guy's, I get a lot of these really wealthy VIP types that come in sometimes, and some of their insecurities are just freaking ridiculous. And this one guy saying, yeah, if somebody comes up and, grabs my wife's ass or something, I want to be able to do X, Y, or Z to them. And I'm like, I'm looking at him. I go, you do understand what you're saying, right? I mean, first of all, maybe don't take your wife to those type of places. Dude, you make a lot of money. You're doing really well. You can kind of up your game a little bit. Number two, do you even know anything about this person that you're about to go after? You don't know. That's what's so funny. Like, people don't understand I walk outside my door. I have no idea who's who. I have no idea what their background is. I have no idea what will trigger them or anything. And so why look for it? You don't have to, or why immediately come at a situation with the intent or posturing that you might use violence. It's never going to be to your advantage to do that.
No.
And so people might think like I'm dissing people or I'm giving people a hard time or something, but I'm not. It's so funny. These same guys will say stuff about my training, and I'll know they've never looked at anything that I've done. They'll look at maybe like day one of a seminar, where I got brand new people and they're, got them kind of slowly moving into the training and stuff. And they're, oh, like, this training's so slow. And it's this, okay, if that's the best you can do, fine. I don't waste my time even dealing with people like that. The best people in the world, what I've learned a long time ago was the more dangerous the training got as far as lethality, the calmer and slower and smoother the training was. My instructors. So my crazy SEAL instructors in phase 1, those same crazy SEAL instructors in phase 2, back then phase 2 was weapons and explosives out at San Clemente Island. All of a sudden, they'd still hammer the crap out of us during PT and stuff like that. But when we got on the range or we got in the explosives range, man, it was calm, cool, collected the whole time. So that clip for me kind of like puts it all together. It was an interesting, he and I had an exchange, and we were talking, a lot about the industry, and it's useful for you because, listen, if you are in any scenarios where you're going to trainings and they're training you in these weird situations like bar fights or just social stuff that makes no sense whatsoever to respond that way, meaning unless you're devoid of choice, meaning if you're attacked at a bar and you got to fight for your life, that's a completely different situation than escalating a verbal conflict or participating in some antisocial aggression and then trying to, kick the guy's ass. It's juvenile, and I see far too much of it. And the other thing is this idea too of not understanding that training, your foundational training, should all be an effective movement, effective strike, stuff you can do right away. Not that you're coordinated, not that you get it right, but that you know where to put your effort on the human body to get a real result. What parts of the human body are going to yield an injury as we describe it. And that means that, the person is injured in such a way that you take the brain out of the equation. They have to respond to the trauma, no matter what they want to do. And we've talked about that in other videos. But what I see is all of a sudden there'll be this thing where they focus on the tool. Maybe it's a knife, maybe it's a stick, firearm, and they never go back to the brain body first. Meaning, the brain is your weapon system, your body is your first set of tools that you have, and everything else is ancillary. And when you come from that perspective, you see things as nice and extra, and as I call them, labor-saving devices. That's what a tool is. It does something that your bare hands can't do. But that methodology just reaps, huge results, because if you are in your, underwear and you feel with your brain and body, you understand how to protect yourself using just those tools, you're that much better when we add something like a knife or a club or a firearm. We learned that in the military early on. We dropped the operators down to just, fighting in their, basically in their underwear. And then we'd give them back kit after that. You don't ever want to be dependent on a tool. It's just ridiculous. And then that whole concept of making sure whatever you're learning first is effective. And then if you have the luxury of time, you can get efficient, meaning you can get smoother. You can learn how to, move better and stuff like that. But make sure that every strike or anything that you're doing on a human, when it comes to surviving violence, gets a result. That's the most important thing, that you're not learning a movement. You are learning something that will get a result on the human body. This is where I see most systems fail at the beginning, especially. You need that foundation. Anyways, I just wanted to share this with you. I hope you found it interesting. Again, thank you for your support. Remember, go to timlarkin.com, sign up for your free masterclass, and also send a video from this YouTube channel to one of your friends. Tell them that this information is available. I'd really appreciate it. Until next time, all the best.